So, two approaches to the problem of so called nature, East and West. One, the question whether there are these elementary ideas or in the hands of in the hands of Jung, archetypes. Um, One might think that Jung, in speaking of archetypes, thinks only of his classical scholarship, of his coming back to the Greek beginnings, but Jung was also influenced by modern scholarship, where the idea of, I believe they're called the Elementaren Gedanken, were raised, and that this influenced people like Claude Levi Strauss. It influenced people like um, Jung and some others, Joseph Campbell. So that the archetype idea is not only something um, uh, rediscovered out of antiquity or discovered out of thoroughgoing scholarship, but it was also connected to some modern trends. Um, but if we take this just as the question in its own right, as even in posing the questions, we're already going into some issues which could be posed in more than one way. So, do all human communities have certain elementary concepts which they all share? So, for instance, this is in a way um, at the basis for Leo Strauss's approach to a new um, Platonic political philosophy or Platonic philosophy, in the sense that he admits in his concept of the citizen's understanding that there have been human communities which have been lacking in certain concepts. For instance, that not all human communities have had the notion of being in the sense of the copula, in the sense of is, in the sense, or put it in another way, rather than putting it that way, let's say in the sense that the early Greek thinkers brought it forward. So allowing that maybe they didn't think it exactly as a copula, but there's some linguistic evidence to show these languages did use the word is or ist in German. We're in luck as English speakers that Heidegger, when he speaks of the ist as the is, the word ist works the same way in auf Deutsch that it does in English. But you can show linguistically that not all languages thought is that way. But putting that aside, even if that's not the main thing, we can then say Anaximander, Anaximenes, Mandes, and the other early Thales, Protagoras, and all the early Greek thinkers that spoke of the is. It's possible that that they came to does not exist in other human communities, but nonetheless, one, either that the other human communities could also arrive at that position, Parmenides, Heraclitus, etc., or two, that that's not the highest thing. Maybe the is a misdirection, but that there are such communities, and that whatever their basic ideas may be, they would conform with the highest idea of justice, and that therefore they can still be discovered. Whereas I say Heidegger, um, it seems that in subscribing to his understanding of historicism, which is centered around uh, Western history, which I want to mention here because in speaking of Fusus as history, we'll then be following the way Heidegger understands the unfolding of the West, which is primarily through, let's say, 100 or so of the great thinkers in the tradition, and the way these ideas unfold in them, um, and their position in each Schwerpunkt or citizens' understanding, using these sort of as overlapping correct notions, or in Heidegger's sense, how would that be in Heidegger's sense? That's what we were cast into. Um, that's what we found or grew into and found ourselves in the historical moment of being. Um, this understanding of there's room in here, I believe, for even some kind of coming back together of the so-called historicism and of Heidegger and Leo Strauss, let's say, but also in other ways. So the big thing there would be the unfold for Heidegger. It would be this unfolding of nature into the technological essence. So fuses to the technological essence. So in China, after the um, the old literati, the production, the literati officials, the Wenren officials, the production of the formation they got in the examination system, largely centered around the Confucian classics. They went extinct at a certain moment, and a sort of intelligentsia came in, thinking of the period of Sun Yat-sen and this sort of, in a way, still the warlord period, but also the period of the first. Sun Yat-sen had a concept of the he called the something like the triple demism, with the word deem being the word from the Greek for democrat. You know, the demes, Socrates is from a particular deme, and then we say this deme today, it's their choice, their chance to rule and become a die-cast, the so-called, in a somewhat misleading phrase, the judge juryman, but there's no notion of a juryman because jurymen are really thought from the English common law as a way to buffer the population against the government. But there's no idea like that in Plato. There's no idea of, or in the whole, not just, it's misleading even to say in Plato, in the whole early Greek world, there was no idea of buffering the society against the government in this sense of the rights of men or something like that. But there was the idea of democracy in the sense of the demes being chosen by lot, and of who will rule this week. And then sometime, and of course, then there's famous instances of Socrates being chosen to be one of them, and as it were, filibustering while the Athenians were acting crazy and waiting for them to calm down, and then getting them to not kill some generals who had left the bodies of dead comrades to sink into the sea in the Battle of the Arginusa, because there was a great it was a great matter for bodies not to be buried properly. And then you can see in that at some point about the criticism of the old superstition, if you like, not being rational enough, perhaps. But in any case, Sun Yat-sen was drawing on Western ideas of democracy with his idea of the triple demism, And here's another, so one of these other intelligentsia of this period that followed the end of the examination period and was very westernized. Here's a statement from one of these other guys about 1924. We have been born in a most meaningful age, the age of great revolution in human cultural history. I have now become a thoroughgoing believer in Marxism. For this age in which we live, Marxism provides the only solution. Matter is the mother of spirit. A high development and equal distribution of material civilization will be the placenta of a new spiritual civilization. Now I am wide awake. Feng Wu, now I am wide awake. I feel that I have found the key to the contradictory problems which I was once unable to solve. Perhaps my poetry will die as a consequence of this, but if so, nothing can be done about it. Notable is the phrase, not just for the word placenta, but a high development and equal distribution of material civilization will be the placenta of a new spiritual civilization. So this idea that out of the Marxism, which is basically, what he means by that is basically that the economic form determines, if you have feudalism, you get a certain kind of legal system. If you have the current system, recently Samuel Moyn has declared that he believes that under the current form of global capitalism, the legal system that goes along with that is the human rights talk, which we've heard a lot about of late, and also we hear about its ancient lineage, but it's only come to prominence since about the end of World War II. But it's notable that he's saying, from out of this understanding, the understanding of the labor is the source of all human value, the economic production is the source of human value, and then the so-called superstructure, the laws and everything else follows on that. We will then come to that is the placenta of a new spiritual civilization. Let's feed on that, and we'll rise to this higher civilization. But you see, they're speaking very much in Western terms. And I have this is somebody. What I just read was by somebody called Kuo Mo/Jo, Ku Mojo. I have some other even more, let's say, conceptual, theoretical evidence of how the Western thinking was synthesized by this new intelligentsia around the period of, during the early period of the national, of the it wasn't the PRC, but the first Chinese nationalism under the first Chinese nationalism, then this warlord period, and then of course Mao didn't come in until the World War II period. So there's a big tumultuous time there when Western ideas were very powerful. One, if we start with fuses, if we regard in a Heideggerian manner fuses as the canonical core of Western thinking, because of course that then comes to Plato, and then it comes even to the height of its exactitude in Aristotle's analysis of fuses, where he looks at, say, I think 5 different views of fuses, and then he says this is the one that's most essential to us. Then we can compare that to how this was received in China in this period, and how the Chinese concepts changed accordingly. So say the first meaning of fuses, which is given in Odyssey. These days, even if one has something from one's own reading, classicists sometimes write these Wikipedia pages, and then you get all kinds of things that, even if they're from your own reading, you find them laid out in the Wikipedia page, and then it's sort of like, in a way, that can be disappointing. In this case, I had heard this from secondary sources already, but I hadn't noticed this in reading the Odyssey. But so there's something of a convenience in these Wikipedia pages, but at the same time, it's can be depressing in a way, because it's like, oh, all these things are just there for the Wikipedia page for people that haven't really appreciated them from their own readings, and so on and so forth. But in any case, the first mention of Fusus, or nature, in the West is to be found in the Odyssey, where the Homeric or Homer's Odyssey, depending on how you see it, there's different debates about whether Homer was an actual man or not, because it's part of the tradition of the rhapsodies. So over hundreds of years, the poems were formed, and therefore many authors contributed to it, whether or not there was an original, somebody called Homer. But in any case, the concept is twofold, and it refers both to the look of the thing. In this case, they're describing a root of some kind, the way it looks, its color, and also to what it does, that it's that has in Moliere's much later Mach, how is it, the virtue dormitiva, the power, the power to put one to sleep. So it has this twofold structure already in this first usage, the outward look and this sort of it would be of use to know whether the word dunamis is used in Homer. I don't know that, but apparently the dunamis, or the potential, the possibility, the Möglichkeit, however you like, it has this sleep-making possibility. So then we have to look at that through how much we can understand Aristotle's understanding of nature as the principle of motion allowing itself to play out as it would unobstructed, and basically which we can gloss as the what I was saying before about the orange tree being planted in the right soil and therefore producing an orange. Whereas, of course, if it was, which Aristotle begins by saying that stones fall down because he believes up and down is absolute. And that's what stones do if they're not, you don't put your hand in the way and stop it from falling down, it will fall down. And in the same way, if the seed gets all the right conditions, if it's not halted in its development, if it doesn't go to seed, if it doesn't become hubristic, in the sense that plants can become hubristic by not, by stunting their growth, by not coming to their full development, by not developing the ripeness of the orange, then it fulfills its nature. So we have this concept in the Chinese tradition, which goes back to the time when Buddhism became the most important intellectual force in China, which is called the T'(I) / Jung dichotomy, Ti/Yung, which is accredited to, in the modern period, it was the originator of it, I don't know, but in the modern period, in the period of the intelligentsia I was just mentioning, there's somebody called Zhidong, Zhidong, who styled this as the substance function dichotomy, whereby he said that there would be a core substance of the Chinese thinking, and then the Western thinking, which he regarded as a practical functional thinking, would be the external part of that. If you think of Fusus in terms of, Aristotle talks of substance essence and teleology almost identically. So if you think of this substance, and we always think of substance when we're talking about nature in the West, even Daniel Dennett speaks of substance, and Daniel Dennett, in a way, maybe show the most extreme form, one most extreme form of thinking of nature when he says there's only one stuff, right? But by stuff, he just means substance. It's actually a kind of it's a claim that beyond all the appearances, I see a bench, I see flowers, I see different colors, but supposedly underneath, they're all one stuff, one substance. This dichotomy between the look